It's such a chill lead. It grows. Here it comes. Welcome. Good Friday morning. You're listening to 21.6 on that. And this is Bridging Civil Tension with Bill Wallace and Kent Jones. It's like a bad 90s nightclub lead in here.
I can see the purple and teal windbreaker jackets dancing to this music.
Starter. That's the way to do it. The old Charlotte Hornets ones.
Yeah, there were 5 fanny packs worn in that music video.
Right.
Guaranteed.
5 fanny packs, and of course one cowbell. That was it. All right. Hey, welcome in, everybody. Welcome back to Bridging Civil Tension. I'm Kent Jones. The guy down in Georgia is co-host Phil Wallace. Hey, Phil.
How are you, bud?
Good. We are excited to be back. Took a week off through Thanksgiving. You decided to stay down in Georgia and help out family, which is great. So awesome. And good morning, Gary from Singapore. Glad that you're with us. Ted, good morning. Appreciate you being here. And our good friend Lisa, long time no see. Great new show last night, Lisa, with What If. So here's what's burning on the plate, on the bridge. Here's what's burning the bridge down. It is this. It kind of threw me off, and I'm not sure how I felt about it right away. So let me just read this. Mayor Greg Fisher, the Louisville, Kentucky mayor, on Tuesday announced an executive order declaring racism a public health crisis in the city. Now, this order lays out in stark terms the societal, economical, physical, and mental health impacts of racism on not just Black Louisville, but all people of our city, Fisher said during a Tuesday news conference. Of course, we can't change America by ourselves, but we can show America how a city can change itself. We can channel the energy from the pain we've experienced and take ourselves from tragedy to transformation. Louisville became a focal point, of course, for protesters calling for racial justice and police reform earlier this year following the death of Breonna Taylor. As we all remember, Taylor was shot and killed by Louisville police officers in March. And Fisher on Tuesday laid out a plan targeting 7 areas for the city's elected officials and residents, including public safety, support for children and families, Black employment, Black wealth, housing and neighborhood investment, health and voting. The mayor's office on Tuesday announced a slate of projects and initiatives within each one of those categories, ranging from recruiting a police chief to build a culture of guardianship and corresponding budget reallocation for city law enforcement, to assisting Black-owned businesses and providing additional COVID-19 testing in the Black community. Is it a health crisis? What do you think, Phil? Is that a health crisis, racism?
I don't see how it wouldn't be.
What help me out with that?
So I guess, like, if you're looking at health as like, does racism make you sneeze or cough? No. But in the suburban area which we both live in, you'll hear talk about the protection of mental health of our youth very frequently. And as we talked about multiple times on the show, we'll talk about bullying as a form of hurting someone's mental health. Okay, so bullying isn't just saying that someone's a nerd for wearing glasses. Bullying is all sorts of type of verbal abuse or physical abuse to another person or peer. Okay, cool. So how does racism and acts of racism and segregation and things of that nature, redlining and prevention of housing due to race, how does that not qualify as?
Well, redlining isn't done anymore as far as I know.
So when the mayor openly talks about how that's a problem in their city,
Yeah.
you don't think that it's done?
That redlining is I would have to see it. I can't speak enough about it. Being in the banking industry, I know that we don't redline as
Right,
lenders, right?
right. And at the same time, most banks are smart enough not to physically, like, to literally admit, yeah, this is what we do. But it's to the point where, as a mayor, he recognizes, hey, this is significantly lower as far as African Americans that were denied access to proper housing in these areas compared to other cities in the
Hmm.
area.
Yeah,
Although the term redlining isn't said, he's letting you know it's bad enough that it's this noticeable. You can
yeah,
call it what you want to. You can call it blue lining. It still does the same thing.
and here's what I want people before people jump on the bandwagon and understand: this isn't a political move. This mayor cannot run for mayor again. He served 2 terms, and in the city of Louisville, you can only serve 2 or 3 terms. But he can't run again. So it's not like he's trying to win people's vote, because
Right.
when his term is done in 2022 or whatever it is, he's done. He washes his hands and he leaves. Now, the issue that I have, I think, is that this health crisis is for black employment, black housing. What about Latinos? What about Asians? What I mean, if we're talking about racism, does racism only stop with black people?
Not at all. And I will even say, though, with that, I think that the people who would discriminate against blacks would probably most likely, that I've seen in most areas, discriminate against Latinos and Hispanics as well.
Yeah.
And it does open the gate for other races, not just black. I think the problem that we've seen historically, and I think we talked about this on the last episode, is we're able to focus on a niche for everything else that isn't black. We're able to focus on women's rights, we're able to focus on gays' rights, we're able to focus on this pride, we're able to focus on everything else. But as soon as you say, let's fix this thing with towards blacks, that is the only time you see, well, why is it just? Well, why can't we just, and in any other situation, it was perfectly fine. We're able to have and celebrate or strive for any other thing except for the advancements of people of color. And when you do focus on, in this situation, the elimination of discrimination against people of color, you do, by default, I feel it would be umbrella that would fix things for Latinos and Hispanics and Asians and Arabs as well, because you're putting a spotlight on racism.
Well, I mean, there's a bill right now in the Senate, and it's the what is this thing called? The Public Health Service Act of 2020, and to provide public health research investment into understanding and eliminating structural racism and police violence.
Right.
And the short title, I guess, is the act may be cited as the Anti-Racism in Public Health Act of 2020.
Right.
And in there, this particular one, it brings about for centuries, and I'll just read it: structural racism, defined by the National Museum of African American History and Culture as an overreaching system of racial bias across institutions and society in the United States, has negatively affected communities of color, especially Black, Latinx, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and American Indian and Alaska Native people, to expand and reinforce white supremacy. So what you're saying is this bill should just cut it back to just black people.
No, no, no. That's not at all what I said. I said that when you do allow certain things, like the civil rights was mostly about blacks and whites, right? But by default, other races were able to benefit as well. When you are focusing on and you start to open the door to, yes, we're going to focus on this, then it's much easier to say, listen, going towards Hispanics and Latinos is wrong too, or Asians is wrong too. And then you start to have the conversation of, listen, any discrimination at all towards anyone that is, would be categorized as racism is wrong. Let's fix it. But the problem is we never get a chance to focus on this specific topic. We've tried it this long doing a blanket approach and it doesn't work. The only time there was progress was when it was kind of specified and narrowed down. So let's get that done.
Yeah.
Because what I've seen most of the time is racist people aren't racist towards just blacks, but like Latinos and like Asians too. Racist people are pretty much racist across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. If you want, like, I'm not saying the word black as a placeholder, but when you're saying black, you're really getting an opportunity for people of color. If you want to change it from black to people of color to make people feel better, awesome.
Well, isn't that what America wants to do? Is make everybody feel better,
Yeah,
right? Politically,
they want to make certain people feel better.
politically correct, right?
They could care less how other people feel.
Uh,
I'm,
well,
I'm just
Gary from Singapore writes in and says, I think the reason why most in the U.S. associate racism to black is because for the large majority of them, they do not know of any world outside of the U.S. It's basically blinkers and poor awareness that the U.S. is the only country in the world that gives them that perception. Ah, okay. So what you're saying, Gary, is there's a lot of racism uh, outside of America that's not that includes other races,
right.
right? So, uh, yeah, and Lisa says racists come in all colors as well. No, I get that, I get that, and I think the reason that I'm shocked. And again, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but the reason that I'm shocked that it's a health crisis is when I think of health, I think of blood pressure and things of that nature, right? I think of, am I healthy? I don't necessarily go to the mental health side when I hear the word health. Now, if they're like, this is a serious mental health crisis, then I would be more apt to say, no, you're absolutely right. Now, the health crisis, and again, I'm not a doctor or an attorney or whatever, might mean just that, right? Include mental health as well, right? But
so
that's why I say,
So then I have a question.
yeah,
If I'm a soccer mom who works and cleans and takes care of kids and everything like that, and I'm busy and I'm stressed because between work and taking care of the home, my anxiety is going up, my blood pressure's up, my mental health is like, that's your health. Like, you would understand that, like, your health. There's people who are prescribed medicine because of their anxiety, because of things that they're going on or said to them. And then again, we talked about the kids who go to therapy for getting bullied. Okay, that's their mental health.
yeah,
And in those situations, it's perfectly understandable for us to allow Timmy to go to the therapist and then take this anxiety medicine to help with his blood pressure or to keep his levels at a certain point. And we understand that the bullying affected his mental health. However, mean words apparently aren't as effective as in words. And I don't understand that.
hmm well, and that's why I say health class. We don't necessarily talk about mental health, right? At least when I was growing up, we didn't. Health class was here's how your body works. Eat vegetables and exercise and then girls get boobies and guys don't get hair in weird places. That's health class to me, right? So growing up, when I hear the word health, I don't, in my opinion, I don't go to mental health. If I hear mental health, now I go into the brain and into the mind, right?
Which affects what though? If
Oh,
you
I
carry
can.
if you carry a bunch of stress in your mind, what does it affect? Your body.
Yeah, it can. Yeah. No, I understand. I'm just saying I don't. So if this would have said, hey, here in Louisville, it's a mental health crisis, I would have been more apt to go, yeah, health crisis. I don't know. So I do a little digging, right? Um, And we've got, I mean, Gary says definitely even here in Singapore, there is racism. It all depends on the level, whether it is societal, institutional, systemic, etc.
Right.
Melissa comes in and says, I don't think it's major health crisis. I know it is. Research has shown that healthcare providers treat Black patients differently than white patients, recommending life saving procedures to white patients more often while being less likely to die and have died during complications. Well, hold on, I just scrolled. Being less likely to administer in pain relief emergency rooms to non-white patients. Women of color are more likely to die and have died during complications while giving birth more than white women. Look up the stats, the OBGYN and reproductive rights of African American women, women of color. That's a major health crisis. Okay, well, we'll get to that in a sec. Adelia says, as a social worker, health does include your brain. It's an organ just like your kidney. Unfortunately, it's the most neglected one. Uh, she goes on to say, culturally, mental health does vary across races. Access to care, finances for care, and the perspective of care plays a role. And Lisa says, yes, those thoughts, stresses, and alike do cause physical health ailments. Right. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying when I hear the word health, I don't go into mental health first. If I hear mental health, I go into mental health. And as taking a look at the bill that's trying to be passed, um, yeah, you're right on, Mel. I mean, says structural racism serves as a major barrier to achieving health equity and eliminating racial and ethnic inequities in the health outcomes that exist alarming rates and are determined by a wider set of focus and systems. Um, Due to structural racism in the United States, non-Hispanic Black women have the highest rates of severe morbidity indicators used by the Center of CDC. Where else does it say? I'm just trying to read it quick. Black men are up to 3.5 times as likely to be killed by police as white men. Da, 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 da. There was one in here that I liked, and I can't find it right now. But yeah, no, and it does show that, and it does show that uh, hospitals in lower income neighborhoods and to the redlining piece that you were talking about, don't have the same don't have the same budget as those that are in the suburbs per se, right? They don't get the same quality of facilities. They don't get the same quality of doctors and whatnot. And my daughter, who's in the healthcare industry, works at probably the worst, one of the worst, or toughest mental hospitals in Illinois, and she's learning that firsthand how different it is, right, than what she had anticipated and seen. So does it? Yeah, yeah, it does. But again, am I like many people across America who says when I hear the word health, I'm going to scoff at it and go, it's not a health issue because health is COVID-19. Health is, you know what I'm saying? I'm playing a little devil's advocate a little bit, but to tell you to say, health is obesity, health is diabetes, you know what I'm saying?
I could see it, but I think that that's willingful ignorance. Like I think that it's cutting it off before I'm willing to learn, and at the same time before I'm willing to even look around, before I'm really even taking the time to look at, well, does it embody? Well, it would. What would cause this? Oh, well, after 5 seconds of concentrated thought, that makes sense. I don't think that it's that tough to see, like, okay, like if I'm being called these names and I have this stress because I'm not able to get hired because of the color of my skin, and I'm stuck in this neighborhood and I can't get this apartment in this nicer neighborhood, so I'm stuck in the south side versus being allowed to be in Darlington apartments in Crystal Lake because they're afraid of the people who look like me, and I'm stuck here with gunshots, and it causes depression and anxiety and stress, and then that leads to other health. Okay, well, I could see where that would be problematic to someone's health. And for a point to get to that, for it to get to the point where the mayor of a city is saying, like, this is a problem, you understand how much stuff is allowed to go underneath the radar when everyone else says, hey, this is bad. But for it to be that bad where it's like it's this noticeable, we have to bring attention to it.
Oh, I get it. Louisville's been tore apart at the seams.
For a long time, they were able to say, they're making it up. They're over exaggerating. It's not that bad. We're not as worse as anywhere else. To the point where a city says, no, y'all, this is legit. It's got to stop. In Kentucky, you have to understand, if I got to pick 5 racist states, Kentucky makes the list.
Yeah.
It's that bad where a racist state says, nah, this is bad.
Yeah. Or is it just one man? Because he didn't take it to the legislature, right?
Kent, you think Kentucky's only racist to one man?
No. I'm just saying, is it one man who's trying to make change, right? Because he didn't take it to the legislature, right? He used his his rights, his executive order. It's an executive order. So it's not like he went to the Kentucky legislature and said, hey, I think we need to do this. This is the mayor of that city saying, I'm going to do an executive order and say, in this city, there's a problem, right? So even though Kentucky is that racist state, then it still is, because this is just you know what I'm saying? The governor hasn't jumped on board and gone, you know what, you're right, and let's get behind you. So it's really just the mayor saying my city is bad.
I think the mayor is one that stepped up. I think there's a bunch of people admitting that the city's bad. And I think it's one. Louisville is just one of those cities where historically it's been bad here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't sum it up that it's just one man's opinion that things are getting out of hand for the first time.
But it was one man who made the move. He didn't have to. I mean, right? I mean,
he didn't have to. He gets no benefits. He's not going to get reelected.
Right.
So they can't use they're just doing this for the black vote.
Right. So 6 years ago when he was new, why didn't he do it then? Right. Why didn't he bring it up then? That's kind
of like us saying, well, 6 years ago, why didn't we have a show?
Well, I didn't have a station at that time. So.
5 years ago we did.
Right. So, but truthfully, right. I mean, it's a big move, and I tip my hat to Greg Fisher to do that. And it's as an executive order, that's a big deal. And Louisville is a hopping city. I mean, there's a lot going on in Louisville. There's major university there, right?
Cool. The Derby.
What's that?
The Derby.
Yeah, the dirt. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. So for this guy to say, and as far as I know, there's no other mayor in any other city who's made the move to do something like this either.
Somebody had to step up.
Right. Now, what he did is he said, okay, the Senate's trying to pass this bill where they're going to have the CDC, and we can talk about that too. I don't know if the CDC is the right place to handle police brutality. I mean, the Center for Disease Control.
Right.
That's neither here nor there. That would be a different thing, maybe. And I'm, again, not an attorney, not a senator or anything like that. So maybe they know what they're doing. But when I hear Centers for Disease Control, I don't think that they're the petri dish pushing scientists that will be the the end all be all. Gary says, in its simplest definition, health is basically defined as free from illness and injury. The illness or injury could be physical, mental, psychological, and sociological, etc. Thanks, Gary. And everybody, I've tried to get all your comments up there on the screen. I appreciate that. And I love that y'all are chiming in, which is great. So if I don't read them at that particular time, just know that they're up there on the screen, which is cool. So um, Lisa says, I think the movement lost momentum and eyes on it when it became violent and demands for retribution rather than change. Oh, go ahead, Phil.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Well, I, I, there's always a tipping point. There's a tipping point in businesses. There's a tipping point in everything. When the pot boiled over, you're going to scold your hand if your hand's too close to the pot. I mean, that to me, it was the noise, and we talked about it on a show, a month and a half ago. It needed some noise, maybe, and it needed some things. Now, again, it wasn't. If we take a look at the protests and the violent protest, it wasn't Black Lives Matters that was out there doing everything like a lot of media outlets wanted us to believe. There was just dirt bags and looters and people out there. You know, Christmas was coming. We had to go get that free 60-inch TV. get it back to the trailer.
Bubba, get your hand. All right.
Yeah. So I like what Adelia says here, right? Is the African American community definitely has a wave of post-traumatic stress. Better yet, still enduring the stress and trauma of seemingly being treated worse than dogs publicly. There's a narrative that has been publicized that can trigger. Hold on. It's been publicized that can trigger mental distress. Yeah.
I mean, Adelia lives down here in Georgia too, and when you see 55-plus-year-old people, 70, 80-year-old men, military vets, but men who can't make eye contact with white people still, and they lower their head as your grandfather or uncle or whatever, that's a mental, that affected their mental health to the point where they're pre-programmed that I'm not good enough to even make eye contact with a white man.
Yeah,
you can't tell me that it doesn't have an effect on someone's health.
No, that was the same thing. You see, when you get pulled over, right?
Right.
When I see the police lights in my rearview mirror, I get a little bit of anxiety and I go, wait a minute, I really haven't done anything wrong. And if I have, I've only been speeding. So here we go. But young African American people in the United States don't have that same luxury to say that. And they're like, it doesn't matter what I say, how I do, or what I'm going to do. I'm going to get hurt in this transaction. Right. So, and that's a bit of a mental issue. I mean, that's bad. And, and that's why I say is I think there's, right. I'm 51 years old, white guy. And I think there's more people like me who see just the word health. I mean, we've got some brilliant people and some brilliant minds with us this morning, much more brilliant than I am, and that's why I love this show and what we want to talk about. But as a 50-year-old white guy, when I hear health, I don't think of mental health right off the bat until the word mental health comes in, right? Now,
what's more far-fetched? Tying racism to mental health, or me having to accept that a gerbil, hamster, dog, or whatever affects and reduces your stress and anxiety?
Say that again.
You being able to tie racism to mental health, or me having to look at a stress relief dog, hamster, pig that I've seen in the airport as a way to reduce your anxiety. Which one seems more far-fetched? Because I have to accept that Rebecca needs a mini pig in the airport with her. There was a lady who went to an interview with a stress relief hamster because it helped her anxiety. I'm not making this up. We set her up for an interview. She went to the interview and her hamster fell out of her purse that was in this little thing she had. But it's there for her anxiety because she's gone through a rough life. I have to accept that that's what she needs because the hamster is tied to her mental health. But
Hey,
it's far fetched to believe that the N word over the course of a man's life is tied to his mental health.
no, no, no. I think it's tied to the mental health. I'm just saying health, right? And so that's what I'm saying is when I hear the word health, I don't go directly to mental health first, right? I go through diabetes, blood pressure. If I go get a health checkup at the hospital or the doctor, they're not asking me psychological questions, right? So when I hear the word health, if I go get a physical, if I right, and they're gonna take my blood pressure and check for cancer and do things. So when I see the word health, I don't go directly to the mental health. Do I know mental health is part of my health? Yes. But that's not where I go when I
Right.
read the word. That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
But if you go somewhere and your blood pressure's high, they're going to ask you, "Are you under a lot of stress lately?" Yeah. Anything happened recently? Actually, I was pulled over. Finish the story.
No, totally agree. And that's what I'm saying is I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying I think there's more people like me who
Right.
when
That
who
don't
when they
understand
who
it's
when
tied.
they right who when they read this and say racism is not a health issue. Racism is a mental health issue, or racism is a societal issue that we really have to deal with. Now, until right, and until I got into this bill that's trying to be passed, and what this mayor in Louisville has done, um, I've chosen to ignore the fact that African Americans, people of color, get less quality health care,
Right.
right? Because I haven't had to see it or deal with it. And if I need a hospital, I'm not going from out here in the suburbs down to the south side
Right.
of Chicago. And so I don't know those numbers, right? I don't know I don't know that more black infants die or
So
have a
then,
higher rate of death than white. I don't know that right off the
so
bat.
then, a good question is, why do people in the suburbs scoff at the numbers that depict the reality of African Americans before being properly educated?
Well, nobody.
Why? Why is it that it's always doubt first?
Um. Well,
Because it seems like as we're covering these topics, it's always like, I didn't know and I felt this way. I didn't know and I felt this way. I didn't know and I felt this way. And it's always a hint of doubt.
right,
But it's never, I didn't know, but if that's what they're
right,
saying,
right.
I
Now,
rock with it.
again, for everybody out there, I love you all. I love you all, and I get that the mental part of your health is important, and it all stems from your brain. I get that. I'm just letting you know that when I read the word health, I don't go to the brain. I understand it. Phil will tell you, I read a lot of books. I understand. I don't read fiction. I read books to help me get better as a person. I read books to help me get better mentally. But when I hear the word health, I don't go to the mental part of it, right? So when I see somebody trying to pass a bill saying that racism is a health crisis, I'm telling you that it caught me off guard, and I go and I scoff and laugh, and I'm not the only one who's doing it, right? And I go, it is not a health issue. Now, mental health, we get in there absolutely, and I get it, and it's a societal thing. I'm on your side. I want you to know that I'm on your side. But as y'all are trying to now convince me that mental health is part of health, I get it. I do. And most people do. I'm just saying that when we first read something, how many people in America are going to react to the mayor uh, setting this out as a health crisis are first going to scoff at it, and many people will go, well, that guy's an idiot. He's not. They're not going to do the research that I've done, and because they don't have a show and they don't want to come across this way. That's what I'm saying,
Right.
right? I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that when I first read that, I'm like, what the fuck? This is what? It's the first thing that went through my mind. But then I take time to read those things. I take time to research and look at the numbers. Not everybody does, to Phil's point, and I get it. I get it, right? And there is, right? And then as a guy who wants, and if you know me, Pete, Phil will tell you, I am the guy who wants everybody to be happy. I am the guy who never wants to leave anybody out. I want everybody to be happy. It's one of my faults, right? It makes it tough for me to give people bad news because I want everybody to be happy. And then I say, I get upset because it says the black community. Well, what about the green community? What about, the Asian community? What about, so, and I understand what Bill's saying. And that's a lot of the learning that a lot of America, a lot of the world where there's racism has to overcome. And if we can correct one thing, I think then we can correct several. So I get it. You can as many times as you want. You can comment, call me, email, and say your health has everything to do with your mind. I get it. And then I'll get off my soapbox. But yeah. So Melissa says, "Hey, I think you should consider yourself lucky if when you don't think about mental when discussing health in general. If the mind is not okay, the body is not okay." Yeah, absolutely. And Melissa, you know, you've been in some of the same businesses that I have, where what we try to do is fix our mental structure so that the rest of our life is healthy and good. I get it. You know, I don't think it's doubt. I think we see discrimination. Yeah. Absolutely. And they say if you want to feel racism, if you haven't felt racism, travel and you'll feel it. Adelia, racism, health problem. That's a decision. That's a decision problem. It's an ignorance problem. It's how people were raised problem. It's ideology. Absolutely. Yep. I couldn't agree more. And again, you know, I I'm the youngest of four boys. I understood bullying because my brothers bullied me. But I also never had the N word. Never, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it wasn't. And again, we've talked about this in other shows. I haven't been followed around in stores because of my color, right? So there's parts of that I don't understand. I can't and never will. If that makes sense.
I have an older brother too, and there's Dion bullied me a lot. Like day one was a bloody nose, bullied me. But he's still my brother, so I know that somewhere underneath there he still loves me, despite all the name calling. When a person calls you the N-word and you know it's from a place of hate, it hits different. It's a different kind of bullying. It's a new level.
Yeah.
Like, unsettling to your soul why this person has that much of a problem with your existence. There wasn't a confrontation. There wasn't any reason for them to follow you, arrest you, or call you a certain name or write something on your desk. Out of the unsettlement of their being, they wanted you to know to the core they hate you. It hits different.
Yeah. And it goes, and the comment that Lisa has up there as well is it goes back to education, to exactly what Adelia said is, yeah, not that I was blind, but in my bubble, in my world, I didn't know. Right. I can only go through life on my experiences. I can't go through life on Phil's experiences. I can't go through life on Ted's experience. Ted's in a wheelchair. I can't do that. Even if I rolled around in a wheelchair for a week, I still wouldn't understand. Right. Because if I want to get up and pee in the middle of the night, I'll get up and walk to the bathroom and pee in the middle of the night.
But it goes back to what I was saying. Like, so if it's a learning thing, then why is it when new information seems to be brought up directed towards people of color, why is it a scoff first response? And Ted said, well, there's discrimination for all people. Yeah, but it does seem that repetitively we still have the scoff first response in this direction.
Well, and I think that goes back to what I just said is in my reality, in my experiences. So if I don't think that it's happened, my first reaction has to be, "Pfft, that isn't right, right? Until you take the time to listen or educate yourself and do that. Now, I as I was looking at the bill, that they're trying to pass, I'm like, yeah, come on in, Pete. I'm like CDC, yada yada yada. But then I start reading and seeing that black women are four times more likely to die from pregnancy related causes than white women. American Indian and Alaska Native women are 5 times more likely. I didn't know that.
So if we looked at, well, this happens to all women, it's not just discrimination to black women. And then with a little bit of research, looking outside of, oh, it happens to everybody, you find out that it actually does happen more. Again, I think that if we stop this scoff first response and educate before
Yeah.
it's happening to everyone all the time, that's how people become educated.
No, and there's a show that aired debuted last night called What If, and the question they asked me is, what is your what if? And I said, what if Americans truly understood empathy, right? Where I need to walk in your shoes before I comment, right? So what if that happened? Well, wouldn't it be great? So it's a great show. Airs on Thursday evenings, 5:30. Tune in. Pete, you jumped on the mic. Welcome in.
Hey,
Pete, what up, babe?
hey, man, how you
Turn
doing?
on your mic. Is your mic on?
Is my mic on? Yeah, it should be on. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, how about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. There you go.
There we go. All right. Here's the thing. Here's where the problem is they're going about this the complete wrong way. And I think this is why people perhaps scoff. Because, and Phil, you've talked about there needs to be education. There needs to be education first and foremost, how you classify a subject matter as a health situation, be it physical health, which you right away, as Kent has explained, when people say, hey, it's a health crisis, and we're in the midst of a pandemic situation that they're selling extremely hard here, that's where everyone's brain goes first. This is not racism is not a physical health. Through symptoms of racism, physical health can be impacted because of direct physical harm.
Right.
However, racism, actually, if we're going to look at it as a health situation, it has to be reviewed and then classified as what type of health situation. Obviously, it seems obvious to me, and this is from my own point of view, that it would be a mental health situation. Now, we have to look at that on how we've been addressing it. And if we're at the point where we're saying, look, racism, obviously it exists. We don't like it. We don't appreciate it. It seems and it appears that racism would be a mental health disorder. And for that to happen, for that to be observed, it needs to go through a disorder classification. There's this wonderful, giant, freaking huge book called the DSM-5. A lot of people don't know this book exists, but it actually classifies every acknowledged, recognized mental disorder as accepted and reviewed by the psychologists of the globe. And it is a massive book where psychologists flip through and go, oh, yes, we've studied this. We recognize this as a mental disorder. Here is what, through trial, practice, and error, is what we have decided is a treatment for this. Now, and I'm going to say something that's going to bother an enormous amount of people. But when people, to this point, and to my point, when people decide to identify outside their biological birth gender, that is actually it is an actual mental health disorder recognized and understood as gender dysphoria. It does not make it invalid, but it means that we looked at this long enough and enough people came and said, this is my huge problem. This is our huge problem. And they brought it to the psychologists and the psychiatrists and to the DSM-5 or DSM-5 organization. And they said, this needs to be recognized as a treatable mental health crisis. That's what needs to happen. When you have a mayor who declares this openly as a health crisis without educating people where they're coming from and without going in front of people saying, this is what we have, that's where you get a lot of these reactions of, this is absurd. You don't get the sniffles, you don't cough, you don't vomit, you don't, this is not a physical health crisis. And right now, because this has been such a pervasive and commonly accepted, absolutely commonly accepted character trait globally for eons upon eons upon eons, there is no demonstration or study to show that racism would be or is a mental health defect or disability or issue. Therefore, it does make it extremely hard when people are suffering from depression, anxiety, all these other things that we know to be mental health issues because of, and Phil, as you've stated earlier, because of being called the N-word, being called whatever, being treated in a way that is indicative of racism. It gives you all of these other things that we know to be mental health disorders. So now we got to look, we're at the point where at least someone now, the mayor is saying, hey, and other people are saying, hey, it's related to our health. So now we've got the basis to say, okay, now it's time to look at this. Just as we had gender dysphoria brought to us, now we have the opportunity to look at racism and say, let's observe this. Let's really get into this and let's see, is racism a treatable, and this is key in this, is racism a treatable mental health disorder? And that's why people are having such a hard time with what's been presented by the mayor, because on its face, it does sound absurd because it does not correlate with what we are currently experiencing as a physical health crisis or what we're being shown to be a physical health crisis. Yeah. So now I'm going to shut up and go because I actually have other work I got to do.
That's okay. And of course, that is the producer of the show, Peter Galt. He is also an owner of the station. Adelia just said, "Who is this speaking again?" I like him. Great thoughts. And you know what, Adelia, and I got to throw this out here. I have taken a screenshot of you saying, "Kent, you're correct." I'm going to show my wife that. Because yay, no, it's true, and I like what you have to say there, and yeah, Pete, good great thoughts, of course, which is right in there. Phil, you want to respond to
that? No, I love Pete. I was laughing at what Adelia said that, and I wrote the pizza stud in the comment section.
Yeah. Well, and it is, and maybe that's where I'm that's where I'm coming from. Now, I think, and I tip my hat because I think the mayor, it took huge guts to do what he did.
It did. Earlier, Lisa made a statement in the comment section, and she talked about, that yes, you recognize that all people were participants, but she said, I feel that the momentum, people walked away who were trying to do the protest.
Yeah.
And I think that it was also recognizing that it was time to regroup, just because it got so diluted with the looting. The message got so misconstrued because it was so closely tied into everything that was going on the bad side. Okay, so a different approach is things like this. Let's not do just this protest because they're just going to do riots. Let's attack it this way.
Yeah.
And so now that we're having a new approach, people were asking for a new approach, but then here we are scoffing at the new approach. It's not rioting, it's not looting. We're just letting you know to be aware of something, and we're going to scoff again. And at the same time, when I'm listening to what Pete said, and although he's right, it's on my side sitting listening in. It's once again where if it's anything to do with the betterment of African Americans or people of color, you have to be very specific. You have to word everything perfectly. And if there's any imperfection that doesn't give white people the information they need to feel warm and fuzzy, they'll discredit it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm trying to figure out why this woman brought a gerbil to an interview.
No, well,
Classified under DSM-5 as an acceptable
right.
treatment for that condition. That's why.
Yeah,
You can't.
what Pete's saying is the gerbil comes because it's been classified under DM5 as an acceptable form of treatment for that type of anxiety.
Right, but
Um,
okay, answering that, I have to now realize you prioritized a gerbil over racism.
No. It's
no,
not been prioritized over. It's simply been done because no one has brought racism
right. So what Pete's saying is it's not being prioritized over. It's simply been done and proven in the medical field where racism hasn't. Right. So to the point,
Let's get to it
maybe,
first.
maybe this guy's a trailblazer, and the three ladies who are trying to pass the Anti-Racism and Public Health Act are trailblazers because now we're going to get people to look at it differently, and now perhaps it'll be classified and there'll be change made, right? Now, again, the amazing thing, now this just happened on Tuesday. The amazing thing is that it happened, and that he did this in a state that is a, and has been for a long time very racially divided, right? For years and years and years. So I think I think that I can't wait to see what happens. Do more mayors, do more governors, do more people? Does the Senate actually pass this baby and make this a law? Right? Again, I don't. There may be some negotiation in there. Maybe that's why they had it go to the Center for Disease Control, but I don't know why they would. But yeah. So I think, of course, that. Yeah, I like what Adelia says there. Absolutely. Racism will be addressed when the behaviors of it are addressed and not tolerated. Also, a willingness to want to change your mindset. Absolutely. I could, yeah, you got it. Sale, good morning. Glad you're with us, brother. Hope you're doing well. Sale says, it may not be in the comments, but it happens in events with protesters that were peacefully protesting. Some saw it as wrong, some saw it as taking a new extreme. But when the looting happened, a lot of comments I kept hearing was, "It's so typical of them to do things like this." Yeah, well, here's what needs to happen. You have to tune into more shows like this. You have to educate. You have to stop listening to, and I'll say, back Ted on this. You have to stop listening and getting your education from the mainstream media.
Mhm.
They're there as a business to make money. And if it bleeds, it leads. And if it irritates people, and who can be the first out with it. So do yourselves a favor. Stop getting from the mainstream media. Stop getting your education from memes. Seriously, right? Start sitting with somebody. Here's what I say. 6 weeks ago, the D's and the R's were flipped, and the D's were very upset, and the R's were, hey, we're the best. And now, because of the election, whoop, they flip. Now the D's are, hey, life's good, and the R's are, right. So that's why I say we have to understand that who's sitting across from me is not a D or an R. It's a human being. Who's sitting across from me is not a black person or not an Asian person. It is a person. And that person has experiences that I don't know of, that I'm unaware of. I love Gary, right, over there in Singapore. But I've never sat with him, nor have I lived in Singapore to understand his point of view on anything. I love him. right? And I think the world of him, from what I know him, intergalactically or however you like, I don't know. But the thing is, until I sit with you, break bread with you, understand who you are and where you're coming from. Let's be honest. There was a time in this country not too long and not too many years ago that if you said that you were Muslim, you were a terrorist. I have now many Muslim friends because I've sat with them to understand their religion, understand who they are, and say, you know what, they're pretty decent people. Right. And some of them I've worked with, worked alongside with, worked for. Doesn't mean that they're bad people.
Right.
Means I was uneducated and my view was what it was. So,
They're a lot better than some of the people who share the same religious belief.
right. Right. And listen, whether it's a health crisis or it isn't, and there are statistics which we could show that are, this mayor and these congresswomen have teed up the ball and hit it.
Right.
I mean, they actually took the ball out of the bag, teed it up, and hit it. So now maybe it may not happen this week, it may not happen next week, it may not happen this year, next year, but guess what? It's going. And whether in 6 weeks this health crisis turns to something different but keeps moving in the right direction, is it a bad thing? I don't think so. I don't know. Go ahead, Phil.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
No, Lisa says this is also a time when we are in a heightened fear society. People's lives are being turned upside down. They're fearing illness, financial destruction, major way of life changes, and so much more. Stop right there. Yes. However, the African American population has been that way for years. Okay. So I understand where you're going with this, right? Any minority, it's been that way. I mean, for years and years and years. Okay. So I appreciate what you're saying. Like or not, the human brain can only handle so much change and so much, so many message units. So it may also partly be some just can't handle hearing about more wrong and more change. Okay. But yeah, but now all this fear and everything that we are have walked into our bubble has been in several people in the United States bubble for a long, long time. If I could say that, I don't know. All right, we're rolling in. We got about 3 minutes, Phil. Anything you want to top on there?
Yeah, just touching on kind of what you just said. I don't think that. I mean, it's funny. There's a letter to Birmingham book with MLK, and he talks about African Americans having to wait until America deems it convenient for change, and it talks about the frustration of having to wait and endure and to be patient, and it just seems that we never get around to it. So when I see that, well, with everything going on, you can't expect us to want to take on more. Why not? Like there wouldn't be a time going on in my life where I'm too busy to help out Kent Jones if I see him struggling. My calendar and the things on it aren't that high of a priority compared to preservation of another person's life. I
Yeah.
got a terrible day, but if I see another person being discriminated or prejudiced or bullied or whatever, you make time, especially when you know it's going to make drastic change moving forward.
Yeah.
So I don't like seeing that but, comma, or what if when it comes to making change. There's always seems to be a reason why we have to put that on pause
Yep.
when it comes in this direction.
Yep. And
But
I
I think
like
it's awesome what they're doing. I'm super excited to see like the rest of the changes that take place, and if this does have a ripple effect through other cities,
I think it'll be great.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's why I say it. I mean, I'm now watching to see how many other major cities or even little cities go, huh? Yeah, let's do this. I like what Ted says. Racism only continues to exist because we as human race continue to refuse to take away the massive labeling of groups and the massive acknowledgement of differences between us. If we are all just human and brothers and sisters, um, working to make this a better world, this becomes way less of a problem. And when we focus on way bigger problems like poverty and hunger in the world, yep. And Gary says, would we agree at its simplest level of understanding that racism is a dislike of someone? It's close. It may not be, it may just be a dislike of color, not a dislike of someone, because I don't know them. But if we agree, would you put the dislike of a particular food in that same level of mental disease as disliking someone?
No, because my broccoli doesn't feel offended.
That's right. Well, and Pete says he's not racist against. Well, he would be racist against bananas then, right? No, and I think the answer to that would be no, because the food, unless you're eating a pig or something, that doesn't have that capacity to think and go and have feelings, right? Just be like, hey, right. So I think
I will say, to what said, I agree. I want, and many people of color want to be just brothers in this country. The problem is, and why we're having the show, and why things like this are being brought up by the mayor in Louisville, is because when you try to go through life as just a brother, you're reminded, due to the color of your skin, that you're not.
Yeah.
And until that stops, we can always continue to pretend, but eventually we run into these reminders that something's different with us. So it's wonderful wishful thinking, and I promise you, brother, I'm there with you. But until people stop giving reminders that something's different, this is going to continue to happen.
Yep. Yep. And listen, for everybody who's tuned in, the 2 million plus listeners, to everybody here on Facebook and YouTube who's joined us and given us your thoughts, I thank you for them. That helps this show be great, and it helps me learn and understand a little bit better as well. And that's what bridging civil tension's all about, right? I absolutely adore Phil, and I've taken emails who said you're too easy on Phil. No, not too easy on him. I just understand what he's saying, right? And people say that I give up too easy. It's not about a fight. It's not about proving him wrong. It's not about proving me right. It's about bridging that civil tension. And when you meet in the middle, and then I can walk to his side or he can walk to mine, that's what this show is all about. And it's about, and Lisa, what if I did twist your words like that? uh, it's about listening. That's it, and you know what? We've got two ears and one mouth, and we never seem to use them properly. So our time is short. Our time is done. For everybody here at 21.6 and up, for Phil, our prayers go to you and your family for the healing of your pops. Just anything we can do, let us know, and we'll be back next week with yet a different version of this show. And yeah, no, you wouldn't share your grape leaves with anybody, I know. But again, thanks everybody. We love you. Thanks for the support. Phil, you need anything from me, let me know. I'm there for you. And until then, everybody, just know that the person walking down the street next to you is just a human being. So love on them like they're your brother or your sister.
Love you guys.